Hi, thank you so much for having me on this call. It's a real honor. My name is Taryn. I use she, her pronouns. Um, and I work with Showing Up for Racial Justice. And if you're not familiar with our work, we organize tens of thousands of white folks into the fight for racial and economic justice. And this is a hugely consequential election. I don't have to tell any of you that. And we were door knocking in Western North Carolina before the storm because along with our partners at the state level, we did an assessment of where were the poor and working class white folks who no one was going to reach except potentially Fox News or the far right or white militias. And so we were out in the sort of foothills of the Appalachians around Asheville in haulers, knocking on doors. And I've been thinking so much since the storm about some very powerful conversations I had with folks at the door and wondering, are they okay? Are their homes okay? And our organizer on the ground after the hurricane, his name is David. He's been doing community organizing for a long time in Asheville, really sprung into action on mutual aid and meeting the needs of this moment in many of the same ways that have been described in this call, and talks about it as a very challenging time, but also a very inspiring time and moving time. And just this past weekend, we put together what we called the Appalachian Weekend of Action, where we brought in members from SURJ chapters across the region and even across the country to be boots on the ground for David's mutual aid operation, and also to start folding in conversations about the election because it's in just over 2 weeks. And there's an urgent need to get information about changed polling locations and changed rules out to folks. There are tens of thousands of people whose polling place is different now. And Asheville and the Western North Carolina region is both has been literally underwater, and people are like emotionally underwater. And we didn't know how it was going to go. That's why we called it a test. But our hypothesis was that if we led with genuine care and curiosity with how folks are doing and offered to connect them with organizations on the ground and resources on the ground, and then asked if they had the info they need about voting, that that would be a good approach or the best approach we thought we could try. And overwhelmingly positive. It was really moving to knock on doors again in that region and ask how folks were and just hear such beautiful responses back. A lot of people describing that they had been checking in on one another in their neighborhood. A lot of folks saying things like, I feel lucky in comparison, other folks have it worse. Being able to point to people on our flyer with websites and QR codes about where they could go for like crowdsourced information and official information. And then when we told them these are the new early voting locations, this is everything you need to vote, they were so grateful. And I have done a lot of door knocking before elections. I've done like 15 years every year, big door knocking campaigns for a variety of issues and campaigns. And I have never experienced anything like this, where folks were, they understand the stakes of the election, they want to vote. There's been so much happening, and they were just really grateful to get the information and be able to make a plan to vote. Um, I talked to two people who are packing up a U-Haul who work in the service sector who have to leave because the restaurants are shutting down. They said everyone we know has to leave. They're moving to Richmond. They said, we're lucky we have somewhere to go. Some of our friends aren't this lucky. And they were so grateful to get the info. They're going to vote on their way out of town. Someone shouted from the upstairs balcony, can I register to vote at an early voting location? And we said yes. And she was like, that's going to be the thing I do before I leave town. It was a, and I think so often in the movement, there's like a false dichotomy between meeting basic needs and mutual aid and political. And disasters are deeply political. And we know that there's nothing natural about the hurricane that swept through. We call it a natural disaster, but it is from deeply political causes. And we can both address the immediate needs that folks have and also work towards the longer term structural changes to try and mitigate climate change, to fully fund FEMA. We know that Project 2025 would defund FEMA altogether. There are very clear choices in this election, and people understand the stakes in this moment, and they really need the information to be able to vote. So that's what we found at the doors. And after this weekend, we're feeling really fully prepared to try and get as many people in as possible, because the local folks who had been knocking on doors before the election jumped into mutual aid, and some of them are working on this effort, but a lot of them are really tired. It's been hard. And so we need some reinforcements from outside. And so I want to share with you an invitation to come and join us. We have set up a little base camp at a very beautiful Episcopal retreat center. It's called Canuga. It's about 45 minutes outside of Asheville. I see some of you nodding. It's a wonderful place, and it's really able to accept a lot of people. There are 40 cottages. I'm in one of the cute little cottages right now. There's a special lake. So it's a very beautiful home base and a spiritual home base. And every day we're going to be going into Asheville, connecting with the local volunteers, and going out and doing these really innovative kinds of door knocks where we combine care checks with really important information about voting. So I want to sincerely invite all of you to join us. It's going to be a wonderful and powerful experience. And I think that's all the time I've got. Thank you so much for having me on this call.